Kim Jun sat in his small apartment in Seoul, eating a bowl of noodles. The television was on, but he was not really watching. He was thinking about a problem with his computer code. He was a software engineer and he enjoyed solving puzzles. His world was one of logic and quiet concentration. Then, every screen in his apartment, the television, his computer monitor, his phone, went black for a moment. When they flickered back to life, they all showed the same thing. A strange blue-skinned creature with large black eyes was speaking. The words it spoke were not Korean, but June understood them perfectly. A translation program was running at the bottom of the screen. The creature introduced itself as Counselor Vrox of the Galactic Council. It spoke in a calm, smooth voice that held no warmth. It said that after a long period of observation, the Galactic Council had reached a decision about Earth. June put his bowl down, his noodles forgotten. Counselor Vrox explained that humanity was a young, aggressive species. He said humans fought too often among themselves. He said they damaged their planet. He said their technology was primitive and dangerous. Because of this, the Galactic Council could not allow humanity to continue on its current path. For its own good and for the safety of the galaxy, Earth was now a protectorate of the Galactic Council. The words protectorate felt cold and wrong to June. It sounded like a prison. The broadcast ended. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then June heard a low hum. It was a sound he had never heard before. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the air itself. He went to his window and looked out. The sky, usually a bright blue, was now filled with shadows. Massive, sleek ships hung in the air over the city. They were silent and unmoving. They did not look like they were built for speed or for battle. They looked like dark, smooth stones. They were just there. At first, people on the streets looked up, pointing. There was confusion and even some excitement. But then the changes began. The light on June's desk lamp flickered and died. He tapped his phone. The screen was black. He pressed the power button. Nothing happened. He looked back out the window. The traffic lights were dark. Cars had stopped in the middle of the streets. The giant digital billboards that lit up the city were blank. The hum from the alien ships was an energy-dampening field. It was not a weapon that destroyed. It was a tool that disabled. It neutralized all of Earth's advanced technology. Power grids failed. Communication networks collapsed. Every complex machine that humanity relied on simply stopped working. The world was plunged into a quiet, controlled darkness. In the days that followed, a new kind of life began. The initial confusion turned to fear, and then to a dull, helpless routine. The alien ships did nothing. They did not attack. They did not send down soldiers. They just hovered, a constant reminder that humanity was no longer in charge. People tried to fight back, of course. In some countries, the military fired missiles at the ships. The missiles would fly up and then, a few hundred meters from their target, their engines would cut out. They would fall back to Earth as useless metal tubes. Fighter jets fell from the sky when their electronics failed. Even simple rifles and bullets seemed to have little effect. The alien ships had powerful shields. They were untouchable. The resistance was not just futile. It was pointless. Humanity's greatest weapons were like toys. They had been made obsolete in an instant. June's life became very small. He had to line up for food and water that was distributed by silent, floating alien drones. He had to walk everywhere because cars and trains no longer worked. His world, which had been connected to the entire planet through the internet, was now just his neighborhood. He felt a deep, heavy feeling of powerlessness. He was a man who built things, who solved problems with his mind, but his mind was useless now. One morning, a drone floated down his street. It projected a list of names onto the wall of a building. June's name was on the list. The order was simple. All individuals with technical skills were to report to a former factory complex on the edge of the city for re-education and labor allocation. It was a conscription order. He had no choice. The factory was a huge, gloomy place. It was filled with piles of what the aliens called archive technology. There were mountains of computers, servers, smartphones, medical equipment, and car engines. June's job, along with hundreds of other engineers and technicians, was to sort through it all. They had to categorize each item for the aliens. His supervisor was a tall, grim man named Lee Chul. Lee Chul had been a sergeant in the army. He had a scar on his cheek and a no-nonsense attitude. He moved through the factory floor with a quiet intensity, his eyes always watching everything. "Don't get any ideas," Lee Chul said to June on his first day, his voice a low growl. "They see everything. They just don't care. To them, we are just animals sorting our own garbage." June nodded and kept his head down. He did his work. But Lee Chul was wrong about one thing. June was getting ideas. As he sorted the archived computers, he noticed something. The aliens were very good at disabling active networked systems, but they paid very little attention to individual disconnected components. A processor by itself was just a piece of rock and metal to them. A hard drive, if it wasn't powered, was just a paperweight. The aliens understood the forest, but they ignored the individual trees. Slowly, carefully, June began to steal. He would slip a small processor chip into his pocket. He would hide a memory stick in the sole of his shoe. He was not sure what he would do with them. He just knew that he needed to have them. It was the only thing that made him feel less helpless. One evening, as he was walking home from the factory, he saw a commotion. A group of people were gathered around a young woman who was standing on a crate. She was speaking to them in a clear, strong voice. Her name was Park Soo-min. She was not talking about fighting the aliens with guns. She was talking about surviving. She was telling people which wells had clean water. She was organizing groups to grow vegetables in city parks. She was setting up a network of messengers to carry information between neighborhoods. "We cannot beat them with their own weapons," she said. "But we are not defeated. We are still here. We are still human. We help each other. We remember who we are. That is our first act of resistance." June stood and listened. Her words were not about grand battles. They were about small, simple things. But they held more power than any speech from Counselor Vrox. She was building something, right under the aliens' noses. That night, in the darkness of his apartment, June looked at the small collection of computer parts he had hidden under a loose floorboard. They were just pieces of metal and silicon, but to him they were seeds. He did not know if they could grow into anything. He did not know if he could build something that the aliens could not disable. But for the first time since the ships had arrived, he felt a flicker of something other than despair. He felt a spark of purpose. The aliens had taken their present and their future. But maybe, just maybe, he could use the pieces of their past to get it back. The work at the factory was long and dull. Day after day, Kim June sorted through piles of dead technology. He felt like a grave digger, burying the world he had once known. The other workers moved with slumped shoulders and tired eyes. They had given up, but June had not. The spark he felt after hearing Park Soo-min speak had grown into a small, steady flame. He watched the alien drones that floated through the factory. They were smooth and silent. They used a kind of energy he did not understand, but he noticed they never scanned the workers' pockets or shoes. They only watched for large movements, for open defiance. The aliens were arrogant. They thought their control was perfect. June decided to test a theory. During a break, he sat alone in a corner. He pulled a small, dead smartphone from his pocket. It was one he had taken from the archive piles. He also had a tiny solar cell from a broken calculator. He connected a few wires, his fingers moving quickly and quietly. He was not trying to turn the phone on. That would be impossible with the dampening field active. He was trying something much simpler. He pointed the solar cell toward a dusty window. A tiny red light on the phone's circuit board flickered for a fraction of a second. It was a sign of life. The dampening field stopped power from flowing through completed circuits, but it did not stop a single tiny component from reacting to raw energy. It was a loophole. A small one, but it was there. He needed help. He could not do this alone. He looked across the break area at Lee Chul, the former sergeant. Lee Chul was sharp. He saw everything. June had to take a risk. That evening, as the workers were leaving, June walked next to Lee Chul. He spoke in a low voice. "The drones," June said. "They are blind to small things." Lee Chul kept walking, his face unchanged. "What small things?" "Pieces, parts, a wire, a chip. They only see the whole machine." June paused. "I think I found a crack in the wall." Lee Chul stopped and turned to look at June. His eyes were hard and searching. "A crack leads to what? A little light? That does not help us. Maybe it does," June said. "What if we could talk to each other? Not with shouts, with whispers. A whisper they cannot hear." Lee Chul was silent for a long moment. He looked up at the dark alien ship hovering over the city. Then he looked back at June. "I know a place. An old auto repair shop. The basement is deep. The ground might block their sensors. We will talk there tomorrow after work. Do not tell anyone." The next day, June followed Lee Chul through quiet back streets. The repair shop was small and looked abandoned. Lee Chul moved a heavy old toolbox to reveal a hidden door in the floor. They went down into a cold, concrete-walled basement. A single battery-powered lantern lit the space. 2 other people were already there. A woman named Jihi, who had been a network engineer, and a young man named Taimin, a robotics student. They were part of Lee Chul's secret network. They were the ones who had not given up. June showed them his idea. He laid out his stolen parts on an old workbench. He explained about the dampening field and his theory about its weakness. "Their technology is like a perfect net," June explained. "It catches all the big fish, but the water and the tiny particles in the water can still pass through. We need to become like water. We need to use signals they think are too weak to matter." Jihai nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. "They use high-frequency energy for everything. Their communications, their sensors, it is all very advanced. But old human technology? We used low-frequency radio waves for a long time. Simple analog signals. It is primitive. They probably filter it out as background noise. That is it," June said, feeling excited. "We cannot fight their signal, so we will hide underneath it." Their project began. They called it the ghost signal. Their goal was to build a transmitter that could send a simple message using a very low-frequency analog wave. It would be a whisper in a storm. If their theory was right, the alien sensors would ignore it. Weeks turned into months. They worked every night in the cold basement. They used parts stolen from the factory, a capacitor from an old radio, a transistor from a broken television. Lee Chul and his people became experts at sneaking pieces out of the factory. They hid components in lunchboxes, in their clothes, in the soles of their shoes. Taemin managed to get an old hand-cranked generator working. It was completely non-electric and produced power through physical motion. The alien's dampening field had no effect on it. The hardest part was building a transmitter without being able to test it. Any active signal upstairs could be detected. They had to build it blind, relying only on their knowledge and hope. Finally, the device was ready. It was a messy collection of wires and circuits fixed to a wooden board. It looked like junk, but to them it was the most beautiful thing in the world. They decided to test it on the roof of the repair shop. It was the most dangerous moment. If they were wrong, the aliens would detect them immediately. That night, the 4 of them stood on the flat roof. The city was dark and quiet below them. The alien ships were dark shapes against the starry sky. June's hands were shaking as he connected the wires to the hand-crank generator. Lee Chul held a small, battery-powered speaker. If the signal was being sent, the speaker would crackle with static. "Ready?" June whispered. Lee Chul nodded, his face a mask of concentration. "Do it." Taemin began to turn the crank of the generator. It made a soft grinding sound. June held his breath. He flipped a small switch on his device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint, low hum came from Lee Chul's speaker. It was just noise, but it was the right kind of noise. June spoke a single word into a simple microphone he had built. "Hello," the speaker crackled. And then faintly, like a voice from a faraway dream, the word came back. "Hello," it worked. The ghost signal worked. The alien ships above them did not move. Their silent drones did not descend. Their whisper had gone unnoticed. They had done it. They had found a way to speak. It was only one word, and it only traveled a few hundred meters. But it was a beginning. For the first time since the annexation, they had struck a blow. It was a silent, invisible blow, but it was real. They looked at each other, their faces lit by the weak moonlight. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply stood there, sharing a quiet, powerful feeling. It was the feeling of hope. They had a voice again. Now they needed to find someone else who was listening. The ghost signal was a fragile thread of hope. For days, the small group in the basement did nothing but send the same simple message. "Hello, is anyone there?" They sent it over and over, a quiet whisper into the dark. They changed the direction of their crude antenna each time, hoping to cover the whole city. They received only silence in return. Lee Chul grew impatient. "We have a voice, but no one is listening. We need to do more than talk. We need to act." He began to plan small, careful operations. His fighters, scattered throughout the city, started taking risks. They would sneak up on the floating alien drones that distributed food and water. While one person caused a distraction, another would use a simple tool to pry off a small panel on the drone. They would not try to destroy it. They would just look inside. They would note the strange, glowing crystals that seemed to power it. They would study the wiring. Then they would close the panel and slip away. It was dangerous work. One man, Taman, was caught. An alien drone shone a bright light on him. A moment later, a beam of energy hit him. He did not die. He simply fell to the ground unconscious. When he woke up hours later, he was in a small bare cell. He was questioned by a cold mechanical voice. Then he was released back onto the streets. He remembered nothing of the questioning, but he felt a deep, lingering fear. The aliens were not kind, but they were not needlessly cruel. They were efficient. Meanwhile, June and Jihai worked to make the ghost signal stronger. They needed more power. They needed a better antenna. They began to risk longer transmissions, sending their whisper further out. One evening, as June was turning the hand crank, the speaker crackled to life. It was not just static. A voice faint and broken came through. "Read you. Signal weak. Location Busan." "Who is this?" June almost dropped the microphone. His heart was pounding. Busan was a city far to the south. Their signal had reached the coast. "This is Seoul," June said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We are in Seoul. My name is Kim June." The voice on the other end became clearer. It was a woman's voice, strong and direct. "Seoul? That is impossible." "The dampening field? We found a way," June said. "A low-frequency signal. They do not seem to hear it." There was a pause. "This is Park Soo-min. We have been trying to coordinate, but we have no way to talk. Your signal. This changes everything." Park Soo-min. June remembered her. The woman giving speeches in the street. The one who talked about helping each other. He felt a surge of relief. They were not alone. Over the next few weeks, the basement in Seoul became the center of a secret web. Using the ghost signal, June and his team made contact with other groups. There was a team in Daegu that was trying to grow food in secret. There was a group in Incheon that was mapping the alien patrol patterns. And there was Park Soo-min in Busan, who was building a network of people who had not given up. Soo-min was a natural leader. She understood what needed to be done. She did not just want to survive. She wanted to fight back. She and Lee Chul began to coordinate. Lee Chul's people in Seoul would cause a distraction. They would lure a drone to one part of the city. At the same time, Soo-min's people in Busan would use that moment to study a different drone. They shared information through June's ghost signal. They learned that the drones were not intelligent. They were controlled by the motherships. They learned that the power crystals could be removed, but they lost their energy quickly when separated from the drone. They were collecting pieces of a puzzle. One night, Soo-min's voice came through the speaker with a new urgency. "June, we have a problem. The aliens are starting a new project. They are building something big in the mountains north of Busan. They are using human workers. We do not know what it is. This was new. The aliens had always been passive occupiers. This was the first active thing they had built. Lee Chul immediately wanted to attack it. We cannot let them build whatever it is," he argued in the basement. "We cannot attack it directly," June said. "We would be destroyed." "We have to know what it is," Jihai said. "Knowledge is our only weapon," Soo-min agreed over the radio. "We need to see it. We need to get someone inside." Lee Chul had an idea. The next day, he volunteered for the construction project. He was strong and looked like a good worker. The aliens accepted him. He joined a long line of people being marched into the mountains. What he saw there stunned him. The aliens were building a massive structure. It was a deep, dark hole drilled straight into the heart of the mountain. Giant machines, powered by the same glowing crystals, were digging. They were not building a base. They were mining. They were pulling raw materials from the earth on a massive scale. That night, Lee Chul returned to the basement, his face grim. "They are not here to watch us," he told the others. "They are here to eat our world. They are taking everything. The iron, the copper, the rare minerals. They are stripping the planet bare." A cold silence filled the room. This was worse than they had imagined. The Galactic Council did not see them as a dangerous species to be controlled. They saw them as pests on a resource-rich rock. Their planet was being consumed. The news spread quickly through the Ghost Network. A new feeling grew among the resistance groups. It was not just hope anymore. It was anger. It was a fierce, burning need to protect their home. June looked at the messy collection of parts on the workbench. Their little whisper was not enough anymore. They needed to do more than talk. They needed to find a way to shout. He had an idea. It was a dangerous idea. If the aliens' dampening field ignored low-frequency signals, could they also ignore very old, very simple machines? Machines that did not use electricity at all? He remembered the hand-crank generator. He thought about old spring-powered motors. He thought about clocks that ran on weights and gears. Their technology stops energy, June said to the group, but it does not stop a spring from uncoiling. It does not stop a gear from turning. Li Chul looked at him. What are you thinking? I am thinking, June said, that we do not need to fight their technology. We need to go around it. We need to build something they cannot even see. The fight was no longer about communication. It was about survival. And for the first time they had a real goal. They had to stop the mining. They had to show the aliens that Earth was not theirs to take. The quiet resistance was about to get much louder. The discovery of the alien mine changed everything. The resistance was no longer a group of people trying to survive. It was an army preparing for war. But it was a war they could not fight with guns and bombs. They had to fight with ideas and with things the aliens had forgotten. Park Soo-min's voice, crackling over the ghost signal, was firm. We must unite, all the groups. We need one plan. She proposed a new name for their effort. They would call it Project Daedalus after the ancient inventor who built wings to escape a prison. It was a name of hope and cleverness. June, Li Chul, and Ji-hai agreed. Their small basement was now the headquarters for a global rebellion. The ghost signal was their nervous system, connecting the brain and soul to limbs all over the country. The plan they formed had two parts. Li Chul called them the tether and the sword. The tether was June's great work. It was an expansion of the ghost signal. His idea was to create a planet-wide blanket of low-frequency noise. This blanket would not damage the alien ships. Instead, it would make Earth invisible to them. It would blind their sensors and confuse their communications. It would be a global smokescreen made of whispers. To build it, they needed two things, power and transmitters. The alien drones used powerful energy crystals. Li Chul's fighters became experts at stealing them. They would stage bigger and bigger distractions. One team would start a fire in an empty building. While the drones were busy putting it out, another team would ambush a single drone, quickly pry it open, and steal its power source. It was dangerous work, and sometimes people were caught and stunned. But they slowly collected a pile of the glowing crystals. For transmitters, they used the old satellite network. The satellites were still in space, dead and silent. But Ji-hai had an idea. The satellites are just metal and wires. The dampening field is in the atmosphere. If we can get a new signal up to them, they could rebroadcast it across the whole planet. The problem was getting a signal that high. Their little hand-crank transmitter was not strong enough. June remembered the old AM radio towers. They were giant structures of steel, built to send powerful signals over long distances. The aliens had ignored them as useless relics, but they were perfect for sending a strong, low-frequency signal straight up into the sky. One by one, resistance groups took control of the old towers. They connected them to the stolen alien power crystals. It was a strange mix of advanced alien technology and simple human machines. It was their first real weapon. The sword was Li Chul's responsibility. This was the part that would actually strike the aliens. They needed ships. They needed weapons. But they could not build anything that used normal electronics. So they looked at what the aliens had left behind. They looked at old construction equipment. A massive digging machine used for building tunnels. It had a powerful drill that ran on hydraulic pressure, not electricity. They looked at old cargo planes that used simple mechanical controls. They looked at railroad tracks and mining carts. In a hidden shipyard inside a deep mountain valley, they began to build their fleet. It was not pretty. They took the body of a large cargo plane and welded thick sheets of steel to it. They removed the electronic controls and replaced them with cables and pulleys a pilot could pull by hand. They attached the giant tunnel-boring drill to its nose. It looked like a flying metal box with a massive spike on the front. They called it the borer. Another ship was built from an old oil tanker. They covered it in metal plates and attached dozens of powerful pneumatic hammers all over its hull, the kind used for breaking concrete. They called this one the jackhammer. Its job was to get close to an alien ship and simply pound on its hull until the shields failed. Their weapons were not lasers. They were repurposed mining tools. A focused plasma cutter meant for slicing through rock became their main cannon. A railgun, which used magnetic force to launch a metal projectile, was useless without power, so they rebuilt it to use a massive spring instead. It was slow to load and clumsy, but the projectile could hit with terrible force. Weeks turned into months. The mine in the mountains grew deeper. The alien ships continued their silent watch, unaware of the activity beneath them. Finally, the day came to test the tether. June stood in the control room, a hidden bunker under an old radio tower. Li Chul and Jihai were with him. Sumin was on the ghost signal from Busan, waiting for the report. June's hand hovered over a large switch. The switch was connected to a series of gears and levers. It was not electric. It was a purely mechanical switch that would release the power from the alien crystals into the radio tower. "Ready?" June asked, his voice tight. "All stations report ready," Jihai said, listening to the ghost signal whispers in her headset. Li Chul just nodded, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on June. June threw the switch. The gears turned. The connection was made. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low hum filled the bunker. It was a sound you could feel in your bones. Outside, the top of the radio tower began to glow with a soft blue light. The tether was active. On the ghost signal, reports started coming in. Busan reports alien drone activity has decreased. They seem confused. Daegu confirms. Sensor sweeps have stopped. Incheon says the mothership's lights are flickering. It worked. The planet-wide blanket of noise was confusing the alien systems. It was not shutting them down, but it was blinding them. For a short time, Earth would be hidden from their view. June let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Li Chul allowed himself a small, grim smile. Sumin's voice came through, clear and strong. "The tether is holding. The way is clear. Prepare the sword." The first part of the plan was a success. They had created their smokescreen. Now it was time to see if their homemade weapons could actually draw blood. The real fight was about to begin. The air in the hidden mountain valley was tense. The Daedalus fleet stood ready. It was not a pretty sight. The ships were bulky and covered in rough weld marks. They looked like flying scrap heaps. But to the men and women standing beside them, they were things of beauty. Li Chul stood in the open cockpit of the lead ship, the Borer. He wore a simple leather helmet and goggles. There were no complex computers in front of him. Instead, he had a series of levers, pulleys, and a simple compass. Behind him, other pilots climbed into their own strange ships. The jackhammer rumbled as its old diesel engines coughed to life. A small, fast ship made from a fighter jet fuselage, now armed with a spring-powered railgun, taxied into position. They called it the Slingshot. June's voice crackled over a low-frequency radio, a larger version of their ghost signal device. "The tether is stable. You have a window. Good luck." Li Chul pulled a lever. The Borer's propellers, powered by a salvaged aircraft engine, began to turn. The ship lifted slowly, heavily into the air. One by one, the rest of the fleet followed. They rose from the valley like a swarm of metal insects, their engines roaring a challenge to the silent sky. High above, the alien mothership hung in orbit. On its bridge, Counselor Vrox watched a screen that showed the planet below. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The clear images of cities and land masses dissolved into static. "A disturbance," reported a crew member. "Planetary sensor net is experiencing massive interference." "We are blind," Vrox hissed in annoyance. "Primitive atmospheric phenomena. It will pass." But it did not pass. And then something else appeared on the screen. Not an image, but a radar signature. Dozens of small crude objects were rising from the planet's surface. "What are those?" Vrox asked, his calm voice now touched with confusion. On the ground, people looked up. They saw the rough, human-made ships climbing into the sky. A cheer went up, first in ones and twos, then in a great wave that swept through the streets. They were fighting back. The alien drones, confused by the tether, reacted slowly. They moved to intercept the human fleet, but their movements were clumsy. They fired energy beams, but the beams were weak and unfocused. The battle was chaotic. The human ships did not fly like the alien ones. They were slow and loud, but they were also unpredictable. The jackhammer flew straight at a large drone. It did not fire a weapon. Instead, it got close, and the dozens of pneumatic hammers on its hull began to pound against the drone's shield. Bang, bang, bang. The shield flickered, then failed. The drone fell from the sky, shattered on the ground below. The slingshot, piloted by a young woman who had been a stunt pilot, danced between the energy beams. She waited for her spring-powered railgun to lock into place. Then she fired. A solid metal rod shot out and smashed through a drone, tearing it in half. But the real target was the mothership. Lee Chul pushed the borer higher and higher. The air grew thin. He could see the curve of the Earth below, and ahead of him, massive and dark, was the alien command ship. Smaller alien fighter ships, faster than the drones, poured out of the mothership. They were not confused. Their weapons were fully powered. "Chul, you have company," Jun's voice shouted over the radio. "I see them," Lee Chul grunted. He pulled hard on a lever, and the borer swung to the side as an energy beam shot past. The ship was not made for this. It groaned in protest. The other human ships fought to protect the borer. The jackhammer placed itself between Lee Chul and the alien fighters, taking hit after hit, its metal hull buckling. The slingshot weaved and fired, drawing their fire. It was a sacrifice. They were buying him time. Lee Chul flew closer to the mothership. He could see its surface now. It was smooth and seamless like dark glass. He aimed the nose of the borer with its giant mining drill at a specific point. Jun and Ji-Hai had studied the energy readings. They believed this was a primary power conduit, a kind of artery for the ship's energy. "Now, Chul, now," Jun yelled. Lee Chul pushed a final lever. The massive drill on the front of the borer began to spin. It was not powered by electricity, but by a complex system of gears and a stolen alien power crystal. It whirred to life, a screaming, grinding noise. He flew straight at the mothership. The alien shields flared as the drill made contact. Sparks of brilliant blue and white light exploded into space. The borer shook violently. Metal screamed. Lee Chul held the controls, his teeth rattling, his eyes fixed on the target. The drill bit deeper. It was not trying to destroy the ship. It was trying to do what it was built for. It was mining. It broke through the outer hull and hit the power conduit inside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wave of energy erupted from the point of impact. It was not an explosion. It was a surge. The bright blue lights that covered the mothership flickered wildly. Then they went dark. The smaller fighter ships, which were connected to the mothership's power, suddenly lost control. They drifted, dead in space. Silence fell. On the ground, the alien drones floating over the cities powered down. They fell to the ground like stones, inert and silent. In the borer, Lee Chul looked at the dark, silent mothership in front of him. His ship was broken, his drill snapped off. But he had done it. He let out a long, slow breath. He keyed his radio. The target is neutralized. On the ground, the silence was broken by a roar of triumph. People hugged and cried. They had won. They had actually won. In the control bunker, Jun sank into a chair, exhausted but smiling. Ji-Hai patted him on the back. They had done the impossible, but the fight was not over. They had won a battle, not the war. The Galactic Council was still out there. And now they knew that Earth was not defenseless. The stunned silence in space would not last forever. They had to be ready for what came next. The silence on Earth was strange and new. For the first time in over a year, there were no alien ships in the sky. The constant low hum of the dampening field was gone. People stepped out of their homes and looked up at a clear blue sky. They could hear birds again. The world felt light, as if a great weight had been lifted. But the leaders of Project Daedalus knew this was only a pause. The Galactic Council was still out there. They had stunned them, but they had not defeated them. The mothership was dead in space, but it was a single ship. There would be more. Park Soo-min called a meeting using the ghost signal. Her voice was calm but serious. "We have their attention now," she said. "We must use it. We cannot wait for them to decide what to do next. We must go to them." Lee Chul, back on the ground after his daring flight, agreed. "We have to speak from a position of strength. We show them we are not afraid." Jun had an idea. "We do not hide our technology," he said. "We show it to them. We show them how we beat them. It is a warning. The plan was bold and dangerous. They would take a ship to the Galactic Council station. They would not go as beggars or prisoners. They would go as equals. They spent days preparing. They took one of their smaller, less damaged ships and cleaned it as best they could. They did not try to hide the weld marks or the rough patches. Let the aliens see it was built from scraps and determination. Lee Chul and 2 of his best pilots would fly it as an escort. Park Soo-min would be the one to speak. She was the voice of Earth. The journey to the council station was tense. As they flew through space, they saw other alien ships. The ships moved to intercept them, but then held back. They were being watched but not attacked. The aliens were curious. The council station was a magnificent structure, like a giant silver wheel spinning slowly in the blackness of space. It was beautiful and terrifying. Their rough human ship looked small and ugly next to it. A landing bay door opened for them. They guided their ship inside. The airlock closed behind them. They were now inside the heart of the power that had conquered them. Soo-min, June, and Lee Chul stepped out of the ship. They were met by a group of silent robotic guards. The guards led them through long, smooth corridors. The walls seemed to be made of light. Everything was clean and quiet and perfect. They entered the council chamber. It was a vast, circular room. In the center was a large, round platform. Around the edges in high seats were the members of the Galactic Council. There were many different species. Some were tall and thin. Some were covered in fur. Some looked almost like insects. They were all looking down at the 3 humans. One of them was Counselor Vrox. His blue skin was flushed with a dark purple color. His large black eyes were fixed on them with cold anger. He stood up. "You," he said, his translated voice dripping with contempt. "You have caused significant damage. You have destroyed council property. Do you understand the consequences?" Park Soo-min did not flinch. She walked forward until she stood in the very center of the room. She looked small, but her presence filled the space. "We understand," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We understand that you came to our world. You saw our conflicts and you called us flawed. You saw our technology and you called it primitive. You never looked deeper," Vrox scoffed. "You used tricks." Low-frequency noise. "Mining tools. It is not advanced, it is clever garbage." "That is where you are wrong," Soo-min said. She turned to June. June stepped forward. He held a small data crystal. It was one they had taken from a captured drone. He placed it on the floor in the center of the platform. A light shot up from the floor and scanned it. "This crystal contains the complete plans for our ghost signal and for the mining drill weapon," Soo-min announced. A murmur went through the council. They were shocked. Why would the humans give away their secrets? "You are surrendering your technology?" another counselor asked, a furry creature with large ears. "No," Soo-min said firmly. "We are showing you our strength. We are showing you that we are not a primitive species. We are an adaptable species. You gave us a problem. We found a solution. You took away our advanced tools, so we used simple ones. You tried to silence us, so we learned to whisper. You thought we were weak, so we showed you we are strong." She looked directly at Vrox. "You came to our world and you saw only what was on the surface. You never saw our will. You never saw our ability to come together. You never saw our courage. That was your mistake." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "The protectorate is over. It is finished. We are not your ward. We are not your property. From this day forward, Earth will take its rightful place as a member of this council. We will speak for ourselves." The chamber was completely silent. The council members stared at her. They had expected begging. They had expected surrender. They had not expected this. They had not expected a declaration of independence. Counselor Vrox looked from Soo-min to the tough, scarred face of Lee Chul, to the quiet, intelligent eyes of Kim June. He saw not 3 helpless primitives. He saw a diplomat, a warrior, and an inventor. He saw the unyielding spirit of an entire planet. He slowly sat down. The anger was gone from his face, replaced by a cold, calculating respect. He had been defeated, not by a superior weapon, but by a superior idea. The stunned silence of the council was the answer. They had no words. The humans had not just won a battle. They had changed the game. Park Soo-min stood her ground, waiting. The galaxy had tried to break Earth, and Earth had struck back. Now it was time to talk.